guys can hear me fine?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So we have a lot of people joining us. If you guys want to put in the chat where you're coming in from, we're lucky to have Geoff and Paul from the Agile Pubcast. So you guys were showing each other your brews then? Is that what you... Now, which one of you likes the ciders? Is that...
That's me.
That's
so
you?
I've over this lockdown period, Tom, I've invested in a local cider company, and they've sent me a box of mystery cider.
Nice.
So what I've been doing to kind of keep an element of joy to this lockdown period, when me and Geoff record, I pull a mystery cider out of the box, and I don't know what it's going to be. So I'm gonna dig in now, and it could be a total surprise. It's usually something that's let's go with something different there.
So Paul, if it's something you don't like, do you still drink it, or do you?
Oh yeah, I've got to drink it. Yeah, I've got to drink it. Here we go. That is, it's a well-known one, Geoff, from Sheppy's.
Sheppy's.
It's very clear. Elderflower.
Elderflower.
Huh.
So that's a local cider for me. That's right down. That was Taunton. Yes, lovely. I'll be honest. I'm not a massive fan of elderflower, but I'll give it a go.
He normally prefers the pink fruits.
Well, I can imagine it will be sweet.
So what do you have, Geoff?
Well, I was showing Paul because this is my home brew. My working from home brew, which I finished fermentation about just before we went or just after we went into lockdown. Sort of coincided.
Yeah.
I was asking Paul whether he could see the difference, because he's seen me have a couple of these pints now, and it's
getting clearer, I think, isn't it?
It's getting clearer, and there's less of a head. It's flatter, it's fruitier, it's changing, because it's still got a little bit of yeast in there, so it's kind of living, and every time you have the pint from the barrel, it's slightly different. So yeah, my own little home brew.
So are you an experienced home brewer, Geoff?
No, I did my first batch a while ago in a pubcast, for the pubcast, just as a bit of an experiment, a bit of a set-based engineering approach. So I took the same base, the same malt base, but then had one batch which had certain types of hops and another batch which had another different type of hops, to see which one I preferred. And in terms of learning and experimenting, that sort of parallel experiments type thing.
Yeah.
And just something a bit of a hobby.
So you're using your agile principles in your brewing.
That was the plan.
Excellent.
So this is
looks
experiment
like
number 4.
Yeah. Vasco says he's having a glass of white wine.
Cheers, Vasco.
Cheers, everyone. If you are having a drink, cheers.
2 people having Sauvignon Blanc. So we have people from Austria. Let's see. I know Tom Kegley's here from Cleveland. I saw, yep. And we have somebody from Maine.
Sharon from Minnesota. Paul and I went to Minnesota. How long ago was that?
2006, that was my friend.
It's a long time ago. But
what'd you think of Minnesota, Geoff?
I loved it, mate. I loved it.
It was cold, wasn't it? From memories, it was cold.
It was cold, yeah. I've got, so funnily enough, so when we were there, we went to see the Timberwolves.
Ah, yeah.
And we went to see the Vikings. Saw the Vikings against the Packers, actually. Local derby. And I bought some kit for my daughter. So I bought her a Vikings cheerleader outfit. She was 2 or 3 at the time. And I bought her a Timberwolves tracksuit, sweatsuit. What would you call it?
Yeah.
And my wife, because I've got a 1-year-old now, my wife got the Minnesota Timberwolves tracksuit out of storage the other day. Reuse it, hand it down. So my daughter probably only wore it like twice, maybe.
Yeah.
And so now he's got a Timberwolves tracksuit.
Oh, that's crazy. My wife is she is like organized every room in our house like 3 times since we've been kind of at home with this pandemic. So I don't think she'd have anything from our kids when they were 1. So it would be probably at Goodwill or something like that. Yeah. So
all the stuff's come out of the loft. Old toys from 16, 17 years ago, clothes, everything. Yeah, so she doesn't throw anything away.
It's these jobs that we're all doing that we probably would never have done before, but emptying boxes that we would never have thought about emptying before.
Yeah. You've got a little bit more time, haven't you, to look through old photo albums. And
I've noticed that on Facebook, a lot of people posting stuff that they've recovered from their loft, or photos they thought they'd lost, or memories are being posted on, which again is another benefit of this, having this time to pull these things out.
So I'm guessing most people know who you guys are, but just to kind of give people a level set, Geoff and Paul from the Agile Pubcast, just kind of tell us a little bit about your background. I think, judging by the chat, most people know who you are, but there might be somebody out there that hasn't heard your pubcast.
You want to go?
Well, you start, and I'll fill in the gaps.
All right. So Paul and I have known each other and worked together for getting on for 20 years now. We used to work at British Telecom together. Used to pretty much sit next to each other, in fact. And so we were part of the Agile coaching team there. And although we've gone our sort of separate ways and doing our own thing, we tend to get together, once a month, maybe a little bit more. We run a couple of classes together, or just catch up for a beer now and again. And we thought, well, if we're going to get together, and we end up talking about Agile stuff anyway, quite a lot of the time, because that's both of our jobs. Maybe it would be interesting if we just stuck a dictaphone in front of us and recorded it. And a few people started to listen to it. A few more people started to listen to it, and we found it was a great opportunity, or excuse, you might say, to get together more frequently and have a few more drinks. So we're up to about episode number 85 now. They're never scripted. We never turn up with a topic in mind. We just have a drink, see what happens.
Just freestyle, don't we?
Just let it go.
And amazingly, people, like Geoff said, people tune in. I don't know, I don't quite know why, but we keep doing them because people keep listening to them. So
you guys are just very compelling.
Maybe. I think it gets maybe less compelling the more I drink, but hey ho. Yeah.
So what are you thinking of the? Is it elderflower?
Elderflower. Again, it's very, as you can imagine, it's very sweet. It's like cordial, really, but it feels very summery. And the weather here, I'm not sure what the weather's like with you, Tom, but at the moment it's pretty nice for April, late April. Yeah. So we're expecting 20 degrees or so this week. So it's quite a nice drink. I've just been out for a run as well, so it's quite a nice thing to have when I came back in. It's quite refreshing. So it's going down quite well, rather.
I was on a work call earlier on, Tom, and somebody I was talking to said that they said today that this month, April, is the best April for a long time. Now, they meant weather-wise.
Yeah.
But my first instinct was, I'm pretty sure a lot of people wouldn't call this the best April in a long time.
Yeah.
But in the UK, it has been a very good month weather-wise, which has taken the edge off quite a lot.
Especially with young kids, it makes childcare a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Let them get outside and wear off some of that energy.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what we have, a 15-year-old boy, and he's got a lot of energy. So he's got to go do stuff, or he drives his mom nuts. So,
I saw someone in the chat, Tom, said I think it was Lisa, saying it's not 5 o'clock in Richmond, Virginia, but it is 5 o'clock somewhere, as Jimmy Buffett once said.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Back on.
So as you guys do that, you have the pubcast, and you do work with other companies. How does that work? Do people give you a hard time for the pubcast, or has that got you a lot of notoriety and helps kind of open your brand, or how does that work for you guys?
I was initially quite nervous about it, wasn't I, Geoff, to be fair? And because I thought it was just going to be, we could be ridiculed, unprofessional, kind of. Yeah. But it's come up in some really strange conversations now that, and quite regularly, I'll be teaching, or I know that Geoff and I teach together, and someone will say, "Oh, we love the podcast." And I was at a conference in London, and I was just walking around the tables, and someone grabbed me and said, "Are you off the podcast?" He didn't quite know. He'd not met me before in a work context, but he recognised me from the photos and from the name. So I think, it's surprisingly it has it struck a chord with a few people. I think it's probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it's been pleasantly surprised, I think.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised if. I suppose we'd never really know if we'd lost out on work because of it. They just wouldn't ever speak to us. But I'd be surprised if anybody who would typically go out and search for some agile coaching help would be and were worried about the reputation would be the ones that were holding the purse strings. But no, it's I wouldn't say it's led to an influx of work, but I don't think it's had too much of an impact either way. It has started, like Paul says, a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
And we get quite a lot of interaction on Twitter now, people asking us questions, topics that we can cover, and we've had a few live sessions where we've been streaming and things, and people joining in, so a bit like this.
Yeah. So Geoff, you've written some books, in this context. Does it help? Is that a platform for you to help? Because I know you've written 3 or 4 books.
4 now.
4, right? So has it helped or not made it much of a difference? Or
I suppose it's a good question in a way. I don't have a good answer for you, because I don't really have the data to really back it up either way, and I've never really been very good at self-publicizing. So Paul and I, we always feel we don't do sponsorship or anything like that. We don't try and plug things, just because we feel guilty, and possibly when we listen to things, we don't really want to listen to the adverts either. So no, I don't. We don't really use the podcast for that. It probably comes up in conversation now and again, but as a passing thing. But no, I can hear your thunderstorm starting.
Good Lord, I wonder what that was then. Wow, serious weather.
My clouds have turned into thunder, so hopefully the Wi-Fi gods keep us together. So we'll see. We've talked a lot about improv on the podcast as well, Paul, and I wouldn't say that you've necessarily seen sales of your book spike after a session where we've been talking about improv.
No, definitely not. But it's and again, we never really viewed it, and we made a conscious effort that it wouldn't be a sales avenue for either of us, and it's just, I quite like the fact, and we've always just kept it very informal, very unscripted, and very even if we have nothing to really talk about, we'll find something, and it's just been there's never been a topic really that we've walked into it with. It's just whatever is on our minds at that given moment.
We had a pub quiz last week. We didn't even record this one, so it's not even going to go out live. We just had a few people into our informal social distance last Friday, and we ran a pub quiz with a few agile questions, and just that started a conversation here, there, and it's amazing. We did worry, what if we turned up and we didn't really have anything to talk about, or we started talking about something and it was nothing to do with agile, what would we do? But that fear's never really materialized.
So when you guys, as you walk through or talk through a topic, do you feel like it helps you to kind of bounce it off of, like Paul bounce it off of Geoff, or vice versa?
Yeah. We've often done, so often we'll do this when so like Paul said, sometimes we teach together now and again. We teach some advanced classes together. And so we'll be together somewhere like in Dublin, Ireland, or in London or somewhere like that. And after work, we'll go to the pub and we'll actually just stick the dictaphone on and we'll just have a chat. And so we'll be kind of debriefing the day, and we'll be talking through our thoughts and rationalizing them and just seeing where they go. And how did you see that, and what did you think about that, and what does that mean, and how's that relevant elsewhere? And it gives you, I think, when we talk to a lot of agile coaches, this idea of if you can explain what you're thinking or a concept to somebody else, it helps you understand it more. And so it's a little bit cathartic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, Paul?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all, like you said, it's also a bit of a retrospective on the day in a kind of slightly more fun way, and it's a different. It takes some of the effort out of, because we wouldn't want to sit down and do it formally at the end of a training class and sit down and have a drains up on how it went, but just the sense of, and a lot of people have said this to us just recently, because a lot of people in this lockdown situation, and they enjoyed, we're doing this regular Friday afternoon, Friday evening thing, certainly in the UK, and then a number of nice tweets that we've had just to say thanks very much for that. It's just nice to share a drink and just to share a bit of chat with people, and it's a kind of a nice way just to actually see an end to the day or see an end to that particular event or whatever it might be that's happened. It is quite relaxing.
Do you guys find that I've talked to a few agile coaches, and like some companies are cutting their hours back. They're looking for options of training or looking for different ways to generate income. Are you hearing from people like, because I know you guys put some things online, and I know Gareth put a plug in for you. He said you're the best agile trainers in the UK. So I don't know if you're paying Gareth. I'm not sure. But do you find people are reaching out for additional training, or they just kind of want to survive the crisis and move slowly through it?
I haven't seen a huge amount of people looking for training right now. I know.
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of people out there that are really enjoying and jumping on the opportunity to run some online training.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there that seem to be busier than ever. But no, I think a lot of, even from a coaching perspective, so I don't really do a huge amount of training. I spend more time either with leadership teams or coaching teams or coaching individuals. And even that has just been a case of, right, we need to take stock. Quite a lot of these people are actually thinking, I need to really think about how this is impacting my business. I need to focus on something else for a minute. And it's quite a normal sort of defensive reaction. It's very sort of short term and narrow, if you like, but it's understandable. And if you think about trying to get people organised to a training course right now, it must be, putting myself in their position, I think that would be quite a long way down the list of things to be thinking about.
Yeah.
But I could think of it the other way, in that actually a lot of organisations now think, well, actually this is more of a reason than ever to be agile.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're ever going to invest in our people and give them the skills and the tools that they need to actually give this a chance, now is the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this term means anything to you over in the States, furlough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in the UK, we're having a lot of that at the moment. People furloughing their workers, sort of effectively putting them on temporary leave, and the government is subsidising a lot of their wages, with the hope that when things get back to normal, the economy can just sort of jumpstart without mass unemployment. Now, what you can't do on furlough is work, but what you can do on furlough is training.
Mm-hmm.
So that is an option, but I think in general there's this sort of concerns about sort of cash flow and supply chain and things like that at the moment.
I think I've seen that. I might be, maybe forecasting too much on this, but I think probably from my perspective, a lot of the hand waving, that sense of that panic has a little, just in terms of routine now, has kind of probably subsided a little bit, maybe, and that new normal is starting to kick in. And a few companies, I think, who have reached out to me just in this last few days, I think have started to say, well, let's assume now this is how we're going to work. Then maybe we do have to start thinking, okay, how do we do this? How do we pursue our training, or how do we pursue our agile journey if we can't be face to face? Because we can't hold on forever. So I think now, particularly in the UK, a lot of people are getting used to that the constraints around working and around being at home. A lot of people are more comfortable with it, and I think slowly, maybe, we might start to see companies start to just try and shift to think, well, how could we, if this is going to carry on for a while, because there's a lot of stories that are saying this could happen for months.
Yeah,
we can't sit on our hands for months. We've got to be able to move this thing forward, and maybe we have to start thinking. Just a couple of inquiries that I've had, or a couple of emails I've had over the last couple of days, have started to give me that sense, maybe.
We have a question in the chat about good remote facilitation tools that you used with teams in this kind of pandemic situation.
Well, you got Paul texted me about this.
I've just spent the last 2 days, and again, it sounds painful and it sounds like a chore, but in some respects, I'm probably better off because of it, because I've spent the last 2 days learning how to use Miro. Have you heard of Miro, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was unaware of it until maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it's that name started to get mentioned to me. But I know Geoff used it, and Geoff ran a class with it and had some success with it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to invest my time and my money and actually start thinking about how I can use this tool. And I've been, finding my way around it, but generally quite impressed. In terms of, I think now I can certainly run a whole class using just one tool, which I hadn't experimented with before. I was just using bits of various different tools just to meet that demand. But I think now, because I've spent a bit of time on redesigning and actually adding some artwork to it, I think I'm actually quite pleased with how it looks and how it kind of flows. So quite impressed with that. But there's quite a few. Google Jamboard I've been using a lot of as well. That's Google product. Again, it's all free, but it's really, really easy to get started with, just like a virtual flip chart. Fun Retro is another one I've heard of. Not used it, but a lot of people are telling me that they are using it. A lot of open source stuff that Jitsi as well is another one that I've been recommended in opposition to Zoom as something which is more open source and more integratable. So yeah, there's I've been really surprised actually. I felt quite limited.
Just saw 2 comments in the chat there. Is it Mural? Oh, it's Miro. That seems to be one of the new battles. Android,
there's 2 of them, isn't there?
Apple.
Yeah.
Is your favorite Miro or is your favorite Mural? And I'm sure it's not just those 2, but because they have similar sounding names, that they're sort of in quite direct competition with one another.
And they do look quite similar, don't they? From what I've seen,
they do.
They're both fabulous.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience, Geoff? Or
well, like Paul said, I jumped into Miro a little bit before him, and it really, really pleasantly surprised me. What was great was, so the one class that I ran with it, I had a couple of people on the class who had more experience with Miro than me, and they were helping me use the tool. Which is great when you consider it from an agile perspective. You're looking to bring the class in anyway. You want that sort of self-engagement. You want that self-management, self-organization. And I often talk to people from a coaching perspective. It's not actually, you having an opinion can be quite detrimental in a way if you want the team to step up. So if you can genuinely not know, I find it easier to coach in a domain where I don't know. Then we sort of had that.
Interesting. So
do you have any favorites?
I've used Mural and Miro. Just working with another coach, we were trying to evaluate some things for a company, but it was more of a cost things where they were not wanting to pay the price for either one of those. So, but yeah, that's the one thing I was wondering about as we kind of go through this situation where there's going to be a lot of, you would think, a lot of people thinking about, okay, how can we solve this problem? Different ways to innovate and solve this solution, and with training and teaching people different things in this. Because like if you're talking about, there's people, and obviously we have this similar situation in the United States too, where companies are furloughing workers and people are, sitting at home and drinking cider or whatever. So, but it's opens a lot of doors for people.
Yeah. Only if you're in South Africa though. So you can't. They banned alcohol, the sale of alcohol, when they went lockdown. Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. So I live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has state-owned liquor stores. They shut down a couple weeks ago when the start of the pandemic. But the funny thing is, so all the neighboring states, so like for instance, I live close to New Jersey. So a lot of people are going to New Jersey to get their booze, or you can go to, so the state of Delaware and the state of West Virginia, which border Pennsylvania, they ask for your ID when you buy your booze. And if you have a Pennsylvania one, they'll say, sorry, we can't sell it to you. So it's a similar situation, but my wife has found wine.com. So we've had a few deliveries from there. So we're okay.
Good.
Mm-hmm. So have you guys used Just Miro, or have you used Miro as well?
I haven't used Miro. No.
Okay.
No, again, it's one of those things. I think a lot of these things just go on sort of word of mouth and personal recommendations. So, I knew a couple of people whose opinion I really trusted, who had really positive experiences, and also they were willing to give me a bit of a free crash course. So a quick dummies guide to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the sort of clincher for me. Not that one had necessarily more features than the other or better features than the other. It was just sort of access and so on.
Well, now Vasco says that if they banned alcohol, it would start a revolution in Finland. So,
there's just this sort of solution type thing. So you're trying to find a solution to things, and I think that that's a natural human response, isn't it? When there's a problem, is to try and find a solution. And that, I don't want to sound like that's a bad thing, but I don't think there is a solution to this. It's about coping, and it's about finding a way of making some progress in the here and now, knowing that in 2 weeks' time things are going to be different, and the solution might be different because the problem might be different. And also there are probably, I'm not going to say infinite, but certainly lots of solutions, and your solution might be equally good and equally valid or more valid than my solution right now, but that doesn't mean that we should all do yours. And I think that one of the things that I'm seeing from this globally is actually, so Paul said that we're sort of getting used to this. Humans are incredibly adaptable. As a species, we're very resilient, and what we are finding is that no matter how alien this sounded to begin with and how scared we all were, I'm not saying it's good or it's easy, but it's a lot more comfortable now and tolerable. And we do that, we adapt. And that's what we're seeing. And as a species now, I think one of the things that we're adapting to is ambiguity. And we'll never become fully comfortable with ambiguity. We're hardwired to avoid it. But if you look at sort of global press conferences and things like that now, governments are feeling more comfortable to say, do you know what? We don't have an answer to that. Whereas in the past, it would have been, I have to give an answer. And it's not causing outcry because people understand that this is so complex and so dangerous that actually saying I don't know, but we're going to figure it out, is the right response. So I was talking to my daughter's A-level age, so just before university, just before college. So quite an important time in her educational career. And a couple of weeks ago, the government came out and said, this year we're not going to do exams. So this year's students, you're not going to take exams. And so her response was, so how do I get my grades? What happens? And they didn't answer that. They just said, we don't know yet. We'll figure it out. But what we do know right now is that you won't be taking exams. But we don't need to know the answer to the second part before we make this decision on the first part. And that's a massive change for a lot of humanity, but it's a really agile response, right?
It makes me wonder as to whether organizations, obviously we can't predict the future, we don't have a crystal ball, but maybe if this huge complexity issue now is staring us in the face, and we don't have an answer to it, maybe companies' leadership will be more comfortable with complexity in the future, that development teams won't get hung out to dry if they don't know how long it'll take to do something, because we don't know that yet. There's too many unknowns. You think that might happen, or am I just maybe too hopeful?
I think so. I think also this idea of we'll become. So I'll put it another way. Quite often when I'm working with an organization, no, I'll say more than quite often. Every time that I'm working with an organization, part of my feedback to them is, you're doing too much stuff. You've got too many pieces of work, projects in progress. Too many plates are spinning. People are spread across too many projects and teams. There's just so much stuff going on that you're not really finishing anything. It's not revolutionary, or it's not particularly insightful, but it's very, very common. And no matter where I go, there are always multiple reasons. If I was being unfair, I'd say excuses as to why they can't stop a lot of this stuff. the regulator, the competitor, trade show, we've signed a contract, this customer's going to sue us if we don't, blah, 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 blah. We've spent too much on it already, or whatever. There's loads and loads of reasons why they can't stop these things. And what we found now is that they've had to. And it hasn't been as catastrophic as their excuses were saying it would be. And so it's been a massive eye-opener for leaders, for project managers, for teams, for organizations in general. Of, do you know what? Are the assumptions that we made about the commitments that we made, maybe they were slightly faulty. And so maybe we could do less stuff, and maybe we will get more stuff done as a result.
I think it was on our call last week, Geoff, one of our regular listeners, David, said he's based in Germany and they've gone down to 80% hours. I think it's 80% hours. So they can only legally work for 80% of their contracted hours. So he says it's a massive real-time prioritization problem. You now have to put some things down because you don't have enough hours in the week to do it, and you can't work any extra hours than you're contracted. So and that is the same for everyone across the board, whether you're the CEO or whether you're just just join the development team. It's for everyone. They've got to do the same thing, and they've got to be brutal about how they prioritize their work. Everyone's prioritizing now.
Well, that's quite key though, isn't it? Because if everyone's doing it, then I'm less scared about me being the only one in my industry and all the competitors carrying on, when actually they've missed the trick there. Because if all their competitors were carrying on thrashing on stuff that they would never get finished, and they were the only ones to cut down, they would have a competitive advantage. But ironically, when they've lost the competitive advantage, they feel safer. But whatever works.
So Hal asks in the chat, any advice on coaching leadership on the value of self-organizing teams, particularly in the current pandemic-infested waters?
So my answer to this one is I'd be interested in what Paul's got to say about this as well, because my view here is that great teams thrive even in the hardest situations. So when you're in really difficult situations, the really, really good stand out from the rest. In my experience, the really, really good teams are the self-organizing teams. So I don't think I would need to do a lot of convincing. My belief is that this will become self-evident because they will see that. Now, in order for them to see it, they need to be able to compare. They need to have a control sample. So they need to be able to see a self-organizing team and a non-self-organizing team and be able to not just see it, but actually look for it. Because unless they're thinking, I'm going to see how this goes, running a conscious experiment or observe consciously, they won't necessarily see it. But having said all that, even self-organizing teams need to feel safe. And the first thing for any leadership to do in these kinds of situations is to create some form of safety. Because otherwise everyone's going to be struggling. And even the most autonomous unit will look for a security blanket when they feel adrift. And it's very easy to feel adrift right now. I don't know, what do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think I was going to mention the safety thing, but you covered it. So the only thing I was mentioning, a couple of people have spoken to me completely outside of my industry and outside of work, but about how they miss their colleagues. So a few of them have been furloughed and a few of them have maybe lost contact. They're not having day-to-day contact with people they work with, but they're not so much missing their relatives because of their family, because they're seeing them every day, but they miss their work colleagues. So that spells to me this sense of people get safety from each other, not just from their boss or their leadership, but from each other. So even if teams aren't seeing each other as often, they probably feel the need to check in with people more. And I think that's never going to be a bad thing, especially in times like this when perhaps people need a bit more connection and they need and the advantage that we have now with the tools that can do this for us. But you don't need to have an excuse now to pick up the phone and just to text someone or just to chat with someone, just to see how they're doing, even if they're not on the team right now. Maybe they've been furloughed or whatever that is, but people that I've spoken to are still checking in with people they work with just to maintain those connections. And I think better teams do that, or feel the need to do that, perhaps without thinking.
Another question from the chat. Can you cover the psychological side of change being difficult for some and they hold out and become problematic? How do you typically address that?
So what are we addressing here? Sorry, the fact that change is problematic.
Yeah, the difficulty of change, from like a psychological change being difficult.
So I think it's difficult, as you would say in America, period. I think it's difficult for everyone. And that sense of psychological safety makes any kind of change easier. But the other thing that really for me makes change easier is the why. So if I know why I'm doing something differently, and I can tap that into my personal objectives and my personal values, then that becomes a lot easier. And if I feel supported in doing that, it becomes a lot easier. So I'm looking from a leadership perspective, and that doesn't have to be an actual executive of an organization. It doesn't have to be a line manager. Anyone who looks to me for leadership, if I can provide some sense of safety, and I can help that person find some sense of purpose and some sense of meaning in the change, and then provide them some level of support, then it suddenly becomes a lot easier. I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly.
Something that again reminds me, is we've talked about this I think last week, Geoff, but don't underestimate as well the safety that people get from being at home. So and I felt this, I went out to the supermarket and it felt like one of the most stressful trips to the supermarket I think I've ever had. But I think it's because I'd spent maybe 6 days at home and I had one day, I'd built it all up towards this one day to go out. And then, so the security I felt when I got back home was like a sense of relief that I'm back within my own four walls. So I think there's a human side to this, that we do tend to feel safer at home anyway. So despite the fact we are all on a virtual meetup here, but we are all within our own homes. So you can build on that sense of safety. People might feel more able to speak out or more able to voice their opinion just because they're at home. Because within my own four walls, I think sometimes we forget how much that can be an advantage as well to making something happen.
So one of the things I like about our podcasts and just me and Paul working together is that he can disagree with me and I can challenge him at times. And just on that point about feeling safe in your own home, there is that everyone should feel. Not everybody does. Most people do. Everybody should feel safe in their own home. But actually, for some people, inviting your work colleagues into your home, or the part of your home where you're having to work from, is quite intimidating. It's quite a sort of vulnerable feeling. Some people, their workspace is their bedroom. Some people, it's they've got their kids around, and they just don't want to show off what's going on in their house, right? And so this is where some of these tools of virtual backgrounds and things like that can be really equalizing, if you like. I know we saw the highlights of that the One World Together music event the other day, and my teenage daughter, I can see inside Lady Gaga's house. That's she knows what she sounds like, right? She's heard her sing, but she'd never seen inside her house before, or see Elton John's garden, and that's sort of that I don't really want people to see inside my house, So,
but Geoff, I think that changes with time, though. I think the more you do it, the safer you feel. The more from my perspective, the more I care less about what's in the background. The more people that I've found who've said they accept it, that's really cool, or I can see your kids playing football in the garden. I was really embarrassed about it to begin with, but you know what? People say that's really nice. You can see your kids outside playing. That's lovely, because you're more human.
Yeah,
you are. You may well be on a conference call, and people have put Twitter pictures, haven't they, of like their makeshift office on an ironing board in the bedroom, because that's the only desk that they had. So there's an air of you've just got to make do with what you've got, and I think people are much more forgiving, and that creates a sense of common struggle, I think, between teams as well, is that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Once you've got there, you can look
Yes.
back and think that was a massive part of that
Yeah.
bond being built. But to take that step,
it can be quite scary. I agree with that bit. Yeah.
So Hazel asks this: best ways to encourage people to challenge those assumptions without needing a global pandemic.
Good question.
Well, it's sort of it's kind of, and I love Hazel. Hi Hazel. Hazel was one of my Kickstarter backers. So I feel I can be a little bit blunt here and say it's kind of a moot point, because the box is open now. You can't go back to a pre-pandemic world.
Yeah.
And so everything, you're living in a history GCSE question. You're living in a college economics question, right? We are living through this now. People are going to be referring back to this point in time for over a century now. And so this is always going to be a massive reference point. And any assumptions that we have going forward are going to be completely different to the assumptions that we had before. So I don't think we need to necessarily answer that. I'd be interested. I don't. We've all got. It can go. The future can go in lots of different ways, obviously. But I don't think we're ever going to have to deal with that situation where those assumptions haven't been challenged again. Is that fair?
I wonder if people, because we'd ask, we talk in our classes about powerful coaching questions, things like that. And given an ideal world, or given a carte blanche, you had carte blanche, an unlimited budget to solve this problem, and some people struggle with that suspended disbelief. But the fact that there couldn't be a question that said, imagine a global pandemic, because we are, like Geoff says, we are having one. We are experiencing that now. So maybe it will help people push themselves that bit further, because maybe there are alternatives that you haven't thought of yet. Maybe it might help that creativity a little bit more.
So Vasco asked this question: what are the mechanisms that are helping people accept uncertainty and the lack of time to do everything they need to do?
So people having people accept.
I think time is helping.
The longer it goes on, surely, the longer it goes on, it becomes more normal.
I think we're proving to ourselves. To me, it's a little bit like accelerated gradual exposure, if that term makes sense. So to overcome a phobia, you gradually expose yourself to that phobia, right? So if I'm afraid of spiders, I might have a really, really small spider in a box over the other side of the room, and I know it's there, I can't see it. But over time, maybe I put it in a transparent box and it'll become bigger and I'll get closer to it. And eventually, the stress levels and literally the heart rate goes down, and the temperature and what have you goes down. It becomes more normal. And every time that you're upping that, you're proving to yourself that you can cope with that. And so what we're doing here is every day that goes by, every milestone, whether that's a week, or we've hit the peak, or whatever that next milestone is, you prove to yourself, okay, so we've done that. My wife and I went for a walk, and the first 3 weeks was the big block in the UK, went to isolation for 3 weeks. And so our first instinct was, well, we'll never do that. We've never had to do that before. We'll fight. The kids will kill each other. And so we went for a walk, and we said, you know what? We've done 3 weeks, and we're still walking together. We're still talking together. We're still on good terms. Wow, we've done that. And we still haven't got any more certainty than we had 3 weeks ago, and our stress levels are lower. And when I say accelerated gradual exposure, is because that's in a very short period of time, but because everything is so concentrated right now, that pace feels right.
This is probably answer the second part of Vasco's question. Doing everything that they need to do. I tell you what, on the flip side of what doesn't help is, and this is especially something that I know that we've all noticed, is bad news. So when it's just all over the radio, for us in our house, the radio is on a lot. So we have the radio on. I just kind of need it for background noise. But we had to turn it off because it's just relaying quite frequently how bad everything is. Until I think it was my wife read something out of the newspaper, or read something off the internet that said, there was some good news. It's something like the curve starting to flatten, or we think we're through the worst of it, whatever it might be. But start just a little bit of good news. But the amount of joy that the sense of positivity that you get from a little bit of good news can be quite powerful. So when I know it's quite hard to look for it, but when we are in a situation where it does seem to be surrounded by global bad news, but just that little glimmer of hope, that little glimmer of positivity can be quite enthusing, and can actually give people that sense. Well, maybe we should carry on. Maybe we should keep pushing with this. Maybe we're going to get through this. Maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel, metaphorically.
That's a really good point. And I talk to a lot of Scrum Masters, product owners, change agents, leaders, and saying, I wasn't using this metaphor then, but what spreads like a virus? Fear spreads like a virus, but also optimism spreads like a virus. If you've got a cynic in your team, that can bring everyone down. But if you've got an optimist in your team, if you've got a happy, smiley person, you can all think of one that people just love being around. And it's really hard to not smile when that person's around. Be that person. Not only does it help other people, but it helps you as well. It's hard to feel bad when you're physically smiling. When you lift the corners of your mouth, it's hard to feel bad. Something
I read about body language as well a while back, but it's very hard to be sad with your arms above your head. Do you realise that? Your arms play a huge part, because that's why you tend, when you're cheering about pop concerts, you tend to cheer with your arms in your air. So it tends to be, and I tease my daughter when she's not having a tantrum. I try and get her to hold her hands, and when she does that, she smiles, and naturally, because she knows what I'm doing, she can't help but smile as her hands going, right, it works.
Interesting.
It's very hard to have an argument with your hands in it.
It's hard because I don't want to make light of anything. I've posted a few things online saying, it's okay to feel good, it's okay to feel happy, it's okay to feel positive. And I don't want to come across as I'm making light of, because there's a lot of hardship going on out there. There's a lot of people dying, a lot of people losing their businesses. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and I don't want to gloss over that. But equally, there's a sense of you can choose how to react, and your choice not only affects you, but it affects everybody around you. And it's not as pithy as just taking lemons and making lemonade, or whatever cliche you want, but there is a sense of, there's something positive. I can choose which message I want to listen to right now.
Holger asked this question: do you ever have a company that you're working with has using too many tools?
Oh, always.
We could go back to BT for that one, couldn't we?
Always. But so as well as Paul and I, we argue. I often argue with myself, which can be entertaining for people watching, I suppose, but troubling for my wife and my therapist. But so I would say yes, but that actually lots of tools can be a good thing as well, because it's easy to over standardize too quickly. BT were guilty of that as well. So as well as having too many tools, and it was fragmented, and nobody could switch between projects because they had to learn so many new things and so on. Equally, so many times you've been told you have to use this particular tool for standardization purposes, and I think there is a nice sweet spot in the middle. And the more complex things are, the more it pays to experiment. Just because I found Miro to be quite useful doesn't mean I should shut myself off from all the other options out there.
Generally, the better tools that I've seen teams use they've two things. They've either been the ones that they've chosen, so involving the team in the decision which tool should we use, or secondly, tools that they've built themselves. And it sounds a bit trivial, but there's a few situations in Nokia where teams just had a bit of free time and created something simple enough that they could use it, and it was meeting the purpose, and it was free, and they were going to maintain it because they built it. So I know that's probably more particular to certain teams that have that skill, but there's nothing to say that you have to use something on the shelf if you could create something similar or better yourself.
Yeah, you work with what you've got and what you know and where your strengths are. So I'm pretty sure that if let's see, I'm just freestyling here. This could go terribly wrong. If my daughter was part of a Scrum team with their friends, she'd put her tool of choice for a retrospective would probably be TikTok.
Yeah.
All right. Now you and I would think, TikTok, really? I don't know. I'm extrapolating onto you here, Tom. Might be doing you a huge disservice, but she's really, really familiar with that and can do great things with it, and that would be really creative, and she'd be comfortable and in a comfort zone. But for us, we've got our comfort zones, and so I think there is a sense of giving the team the freedom, a certain level of freedom, not complete freedom, but a certain level of freedom to find what works for them.
Yeah. I was recently, I think it's in the Accelerate book. They talk about the teams that do the best pick their own tools, and that, when you force a tool on a team, they're obviously not as productive, and, they feel like they kind of resist it. But Vasco has a good question here. What do you think will change when we go back to work in an office?
Who's to say we will?
Good question.
Who's to say we will?
Yeah.
I think both sides, both parts of the relationship there are probably seriously reevaluating that, and companies thinking, we probably could make this work for our people, rather than these massively expensive big office and central locations and things where people are commuting hours and all this stuff. And also people thinking, do you know what, I don't miss my commute.
Yeah.
And all right, not everybody has a great optimum setup for working from home, but equally it's not really working from home for a lot of people either, because for me, I've got 3 kids in the house, right? So it's not, I can't spend 8 hours a day like I did before working. They'd normally be at school or at nursery. So when schools open, you've got a completely different normal to what you have now. But again, it won't be like the old normal, and it won't be like the normal in a year's time or 3 years' time. So it's going to be continued evaluation.
I think travel will be very different. I think people will initially certainly crave going back to work, going back to, I think it's, again, in terms of safety, seeing the people that they've worked with, particularly in stronger teams or stronger organizations. People will want to go back to work with their colleagues or peers or friends. But I think a lot of companies will drastically review the necessity to travel. And a lot of my friends who, that's saying a lot of my friends who would regularly be asked to travel to London probably 2-3 times a week, and they're now saying that's probably largely unnecessary, or to travel to meet, unless you're meeting clients, they're saying travel should be unnecessary. So I think that will. I think
get a kind of rubber band effect to anything extreme, don't you?
Yeah.
So we've been missing our team interactions. We've been missing going out for dinner. We've been missing going to the pub or going to the cinema or whatever. So there's going to be you see all the things that you on social media. When this is over, we're a massive party, or we're going to. So there probably will be a sense of, well, let's all get back together again because we haven't had the chance before, in some form or other. But I think it will slowly sort of settle on something different than before.
The new normal, yeah.
I suppose Vasco's question was, what do we think that new normal will be? And I think there will be less centralised office. I think there will be a lot more of I don't know what the generic term is, but we have so WeWork and what's the generic term for that, Paul?
Co-working space or
workspace, those shared offices where
work hubs,
things like that. That will definitely, I think, be a lot of a bigger thing. I think
my brother-in-law said to me this weekend, which I'd never, things you don't really stop to think about, but the amount of offices, open plan offices, that are not built to maintain a 2-meter distance between people. So you just, both, or any of the offices that I've worked in recently or in previous years, you think back to how that was set up in BT, Geoff, we wouldn't be able to work probably less, a meter at max between desks, between screens. It just wouldn't work. For where we are now, or maybe where we are in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you couldn't maintain a sensible, I think, a 2 meter distance between co-workers.
But humans haven't been designed for that, right? We actually crave physical contact, and we get pleasure and stress release and stress relief from physical contact. So I've seen people saying, on social media, when we go back, I can't see people going back to hugging and kissing on cheeks and handshakes and things. But as well as things will change, we do, as human beings, we do generally have quite short memories.
True.
And so I think habits and culture and that just innate human need and desire to be not just emotionally connected to one another, but physically connected to one another, to be able to greet and have a hug and have a handshake and a high five and what have you. I think that will trump things when things are safe again.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the drive, right? I think that's one of the reasons why we want to fix this. It's not that everyone's saying, do you know what? Yeah, we can stay like this. We don't need to interact with one another anymore. We do. We want to. That's one of the reasons why we're working so hard to try and change things and find a vaccine and fix it, so that we can go back to that sense of society, community, friendship. Call it what you will.
Yeah. And they can have regular pubcasts.
Well, we kind of feel a bit frauds at the moment, because we're still calling our pubcast a pubcast, but we haven't been in a pub for months, Geoff. Well, it feels like months.
Well, so for what it's worth, you can't see this. You can see the wood behind me. I'm in my office, which is in my garden. So it's effectively what used to be a shed. And here, I'll knock on that. That's my homebrew barrel. So I think of this
as a pub,
as the Geoff Arms.
Yeah, Geoff's Arms.
See, I can
you can just do some optics. Geoff, put some optics behind you. That would be perfect.
Get a top up. So so I believe I'm in the pub, and I've got my Agile Pubcast beer mat.
There you go.
Resting my beer on. So yeah, this is coming live from the Geoff Arms.
Excellent. Well, hey guys, it's been about an hour. I appreciate all your time. Just want to thank you, and really appreciate you guys joining us and sharing all this and answering questions and sharing your brews with us.
That's lovely. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, this is going to wrap it up. We'll talk to you soon. We'll let you know what we're working on, planning the next Agile online meetup for next month. So we'll talk to you later. Cheers, guys. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ta-da.